I found out my daughter had gotten married from a corporate newsletter. Not a phone call. Not a message. A public announcement written by someone who didn't even know my name. And the worst part wasn't the wedding. It was realizing she'd been using my financial identity behind my back for months, maybe longer. If you've lived through something like that, tell your story below. I remember the evening with a kind of dull clarity, the way certain shocks carve themselves in without asking permission. Nothing remarkable about the night until my laptop refreshed and Lauren's firm website appeared. A banner stretched across the top our newly married associate. Her name sat directly beneath it. Then her photograph filled the screen, white dress-polished smile, a groom whose face I'd never seen. My hand hovered over the trackpad before enlarging the picture. They stood close. Too close for this to be a last-minute update or an oversight. She leaned toward him like she'd been doing it for years. No text from her. No call. No invitation. Not even a formality. Just this announcement drafted by a marketing team. Something heavy expanded in my chest. Not rage, just the slow bruise of realizing I'd been moved out of her life by administrative upload. The image stayed open while memory supplied its own timeline. The tuition loans, all $180,000 of them, the ones I had co-signed without hesitation. The late-night rides to debate tournaments, the mornings spent trying to play both father and mother, the tight months when every bill felt like a negotiation with fate. And even then, she'd used my home address for her firm's paperwork just months ago. Easier that way, she'd said. Easier for what my eyes drifted back to the groom's hand on her waist. Crisp suit, confident posture. A stranger who'd apparently earned a place in her story while I read about it like a distant acquaintance. The tilt of her head, the smile she saved for others, the warmth she hadn't offered me in years, details that said more than she ever had out loud. She hadn't simply forgotten to tell me. She'd built a world where I no longer fit. A message waited on my phone the next morning. Mark Landon, an old engineering colleague, had forwarded a social post from someone at Lauren's firm. A group photo from the wedding, everyone smiling like they'd witnessed something luminous. The caption read, "Celebrating our brilliant associate on her beautiful new chapter." Mark added one line, "Did you know about this? I stared at the screen, wondering how a man could raise a child, pay for her future, carry the weight of every setback, and still end up learning about her marriage through the kindness of someone who wasn't even family." And the ache that followed wasn't disappointment. It was the clean, unmistakable realization that I'd lost her long before the photograph. "Didn't spot you there. Everything all right?" My reply stayed careful. "Couldn't make it. Hope you're doing well." No explanation. No opening for follow-up questions. The exchange left a thin ache behind the kind that settles deeper once the phone is put away. By midday, 2 of my late wife's relatives texted the same condescending line. "We hope you'll come around eventually." Another asked if I'd accepted that Lauren had her own life now. Not one of them asked what actually happened. Someone had already built a story and cast me as the stubborn father refusing to support her marriage. It spread fast. Lies always do. Lauren offered nothing, no correction, no explanation. Just silence, where a daughter should have stood. The bank called shortly after. The representative confirmed that last month's student loan payment on the $180,000 I'd guaranteed for Lauren had been late. Her voice turned careful when she reminded me guarantors take the first credit hit if there's another delay. That sentence caught deeper than she knew. Years of covering ground so she wouldn't stumble had slowly shifted into something else, me setting myself on fire to keep her future warm. The afternoon clinic appointment forced me out of the house. The walk felt longer than usual. In the exam room, Nurse Marla Jennings strapped the cuff around my arm. Her brow tightened the moment the numbers printed. "Running high today, Ray? Everything all right?" I shrugged. She tried again. "You carrying something heavy at home?" I didn't answer, but whatever sat in my eyes seemed enough. Her tone dropped firm, but steady. "Don't let anyone use your name for anything you didn't agree to. Family doesn't get a pass." The doctor came in, recited his warnings about stress and blood pressure, then left. Marla set the cuff aside. "Be careful with yourself." The words lingered longer than I expected. Outside, another email appeared, Lauren's firm newsletter. Her photo stood in the header, confident, polished, surrounded by associates designing strategic solutions for young entrepreneurs. She looked complete, self-contained. My name didn't exist anywhere in that world. The drive home felt mechanical. Mail waited in a crooked stack by the door, ads bills one envelope from the power company. The house held its usual stillness, but it pressed in a bit harder today. The laptop lit up, and the banking portal loaded. Payment history scrolled across the screen, a late fee from 6 weeks ago. No warning from Lauren, no sign she'd been struggling, only a record showing she nearly let the loan slip into delinquency before scrambling to cover it. Looking at the numbers, something shifted. This wasn't about missing a wedding invitation, or oversight, or distance that might close with time. It was something else, a pattern. A quiet erosion of responsibility. And I'd been the one absorbing the fallout without even knowing it. Rumors painting me as the villain. A daughter who let them stand. A loan teetering on delinquency. And a financial shadow I could feel but hadn't yet named. The text arrived the next afternoon while I sat at the kitchen table sorting a stack of mail. A name I recognized popped onto the screen, Jenna Mills, one of Lauren's colleagues from her clerkship days. "Sorry we didn't get a chance to see you at the wedding. Lauren mentioned you were traveling. Hope it was a good trip." The message pulled the air out of my lungs. Traveling. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was a story she'd created from scratch. A lie spoken casually enough to sound harmless. My hands paused above the table, caught between disbelief and something colder. A long moment passed before my thumb tapped out a simple response. "I wasn't able to attend. Thanks for reaching out. Nothing more." Jenna didn't need the details, and I didn't have any to give. Her words kept circling long after the clinic visit, brushing against old doubts I thought I'd buried. Maybe I had been too rigid. Maybe arguments that lasted minutes for me echoed for years in her. Hard questions resurfaced. Did I push her too hard? Expect too much? Become the weight she needed to escape? Before those thoughts found root, another email appeared from the bank. The representative had attached supplementary loan documents. Halfway down the form, my birth date and address sat beside a blank signature line. Under it, a stylized scribble tried to pass for my name. I stared, reading it again. Someone had used my information without consent. No guesswork, no interpretation. Proof. The distance between Lauren and me sharpened into something colder. Forgetting to invite me to a wedding was one wound. Telling people I was traveling so she didn't have to explain my absence was another. But altering loan paperwork? That wasn't a boundary crossed. That was a boundary ignored. Calling her number felt like the only reasonable step. It rang twice before redirecting to text. A buzz followed. "I'm busy. We'll talk later." No greeting, no explanation. Just a wall slammed shut. I turned to the cabinet where years of her school files stayed boxed and catalogued, FAFSA copies, insurance letters, scholarship attempts, promissory notes. Pulling them out filled the desk with the history of a father doing everything he could to keep a daughter afloat. The motions steadied me. Paper didn't bend to emotion. It told its story plainly. I photocopied statements, saved emails, and documented every bank contact. Screenshots captured her silence alongside my overdue notices. A clean folder labeled June Events held the firm's congratulatory wedding announcement. Nothing dramatic about the title. The truth didn't need embellishment. Evening pushed me toward the garage. The air carried the faint scent of old oil and cut wood. Shelves held tools from my father. The workbench bore half-finished repairs I never rushed. The space grounded me in a way nothing else could. At the back, a plastic bin held Lauren's college documents. Lifting the lid brought back 2 decades in one-breath orientation packets, course schedules, tuition receipts with my signature on every line. A worn folder held the first promissory note she signed at 18. Sorting through the stack blurred pride fatigue and a colder realization. At some point I had shifted from father to fallback option. When she was young, she ran to me. In college, she called for direction. Later, only for help. Now, not at all. The distance between us wasn't sudden. It had widened one unmentioned decision at a time, until I stood on one side and she built a life on the other, without even glancing back. Pages rustled as I returned the documents to their place. Truth settled with them. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a fracture years in the making. A weather alert blinked on my phone, reminding me the world outside kept moving regardless of what broke at home. Bills still arrived. Work still called. Nothing paused to grant me space. Her email arrived just after sunrise, a single line clipped and cold. Please don't interfere with our marriage. We'll handle the loan. Stop stressing us out. No greeting, no explanation, no acknowledgement of the question I'd asked. She reframed my concern as an intrusion turning a financial issue into an attack on her new marriage, a marriage she hadn't even bothered to tell me existed. That sentence didn't spark anger. It cracked something subtle and deep, the way a beam shifts under weight you didn't realize was there. Before I could consider a response, the phone rang. The bank again. The representative spoke with the practiced softness of someone preparing for conflict. Mr. Hale, your daughter's household submitted a request to restructure the student loan you guaranteed. Because you're the primary signer, we'll need your approval, submitted without a word. Another decision made in a room I wasn't invited into. Send me the documents, I said. She promised to email the scan. Her tone suggested she already sensed what I would find. The call ended. I braced a hand on the counter, my pulse steady, but my thoughts shifting. An hour later, another hit. Insurance. A cheerful agent explained that my monthly premium would increase because a late payment had triggered a risk flag. A late payment tied to that loan. The damage hadn't just brushed the edges of my life, it had slipped directly into my financial record. I drove to the grocery store to put some distance between myself and the phone. Before I could get out of the car, the scanned loan document arrived. My details sat at the top. Under them, a digital mark that pretended to be my signature. It had none of my lines, none of my rhythm. A lazy curve pretending to be consent. Someone had signed for me. My chest tightened not with panic, but with recognition. This wasn't carelessness. It was intention. People pushed carts across the lot while I stared at the form, ordinary lives moving forward while mine tilted on a forged squiggle. Lauren hadn't simply withheld a wedding invitation. She and her husband had begun altering legal documents tied to my name. They had done it because I had taught them I wouldn't question anything. Trying to rationalize it led nowhere. The truth stood on its own. The phone dimmed in my hand. The next steps formed with the calm of someone finally seeing the shape of a wound clearly. Keys slid into my pocket. I leaned back in the driver's seat, letting the clarity settle. Silence wouldn't protect me. It never had. I started the engine. The steady vibration under my feet felt more reliable than any conversation I'd had with her in years. Traffic thinned as I merged onto the main road. The choices made without my consent. The forged signature. The mounting harm to my identity. All of it aligned into a single conclusion. My grip tightened on the wheel, not in rage, but in certainty. Whatever happened next wouldn't be emotional. It would be measured, step by step, clean as a cut that finally stops the bleeding. The road out of the grocery lot curved toward a line of small shops when the phone rang again. An unfamiliar number flashed across the display. A cautious voice introduced himself as a former staffer from Barrett and Rowe Lauren's firm. He didn't give his full name, only said he used to handle administrative filings there and had seen my number on documents tied to the new loan request. I thought you should know. He began hesitating as though he might hang up the restructuring form wasn't submitted through regular channels. One of the associates pushed it through because Lauren asked him to hurry it up. They believed you'd already signed off since he paused because she told them the family talked it over. My throat tightened in a way that made speaking nearly impossible. The caller kept going, voice dropping a little lower. She also mentioned that you weren't really able to manage your finances anymore, said she needed to help before things got worse. A dull thud went through my chest. The world didn't tilt or blur, it narrowed. A sentence that simple shouldn't have had that much power yet. Something in it struck a place I had protected for years. The caller apologized, quickly insisted he just wanted to clear his conscience, then hung up. The silence afterward felt heavier than the call itself. A memory pushed up from somewhere deeper. The hospital waiting area after my wife died. Lauren was 18, terrified, clinging to me like a child half her age. Days later, when the first tuition statement arrived, I signed the loan guarantee without hesitation. My reasoning back then had been simple. I would carry whatever weight she couldn't handle. I would make her life easier where mine had become harder. Some parts of grief never really age. They just sit quietly until someone touches the wrong corner. The clinic called a few hours later to say my test results were ready. It wasn't urgent, but picking them up seemed easier than staying home with the noise in my head. The hallways felt the same as always, routine conversations between nurses, the distant hum of printers, but stepping up to the counter left my legs feeling a little unsteady. Marla spotted me before I had the chance to sign in. She walked over with that steady professionalism she carried everywhere, though her expression softened the moment she got close. "Ray," she said gently, "you look worn down. Everything all right?" The question hung there. Answering outright felt impossible. She must have sensed it. "Is someone using your name without asking?" she asked. That simple question hit harder than the anonymous call. It gave shape to something I had been trying not to define. Her eyes held steady contact, not intrusive, not demanding, just enough to remind me that silence wouldn't stop this from escalating. My voice came out rough. Something like that. She nodded once, as if she'd expected the answer. "You can't let them keep doing it. No lecture, no judgment. Just a piece of truth placed gently in front of me." After collecting the printout from the front desk, I walked outside, letting the door shut behind me. A notification waited on my phone, a new post from Lauren's social circle. Curiosity made my thumb open it before I could stop myself. Her caption read, "When parents get older, sometimes they resist help even when you're trying to take care of them. We do what we can." A few sympathetic comments stacked underneath. "You're doing the right thing. Some people just don't understand boundaries. She's such a good daughter." A couple of my in-laws had already shared the rumor. Their comments followed the same patterned soft reprimands aimed squarely at me, wrapped in polite language. My jaw tightened until it hurt. This wasn't confusion anymore. It was architecture. A story built carefully enough that she could justify anything as long as I played the role she'd assigned me the irrational father resisting her happiness. The realization didn't spark rage. Something harder settled in a recognition that I had let this narrative grow by staying passive. My silence had become permission. The house carried a weight the moment I stepped through the door. Not emotional fog, just the kind of heaviness that makes a person stand still for a beat. I set my keys down, pulled out my laptop, and took a seat at the dining table. A new folder appeared on the screen. Naming it took no effort, accountability, no shaking hands, no theatrical pause, just the clean sequence of someone taking stock of what's real. Bank documents, imported screenshots, saved the insurance. Notice added the wedding announcement, filed her email, stored beside it. Each item landed with the certainty of evidence, not anger. This wasn't preparation for a showdown. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity, plain and steady. Parents often mistake endurance for love. They absorb damage until the line between devotion and self-erasure blurs. I had lived in that blur for too long. Endurance hadn't protected anything. It had simply made me easier to use. More files joined the folder: promissory notes, loan statements, the original guarantee from years back. A car passed outside. A neighbor's door slammed. Familiar sounds. Ordinary life continuing, while I acknowledged something I had avoided naming. The ground between Lauren and me had shifted past the point where patience could mend it. The appointment with the financial attorney took place the next morning in a narrow office squeezed between a bike shop and a bakery in Southwest Portland. 2 chairs, 1 desk, a filing cabinet leaning toward retirement. None of that mattered. The only thing that did was the folder in my hands. Statements, notices, the forged signature, every document tied to the loan I should never have had to revisit. The attorney Elliot Brooks reviewed each page. His eyes landed on the digital signature. One brow lifted. "This isn't yours." "No, it's not." He tapped his pen against the forged line. "Because your name and information were used without authorization, you can revoke the guarantee entirely. Legally, the loan becomes hers alone. The bank would have no basis to keep you tied to it." His words hit with the kind of clarity that reshapes posture more than emotion. He slid a notepad toward me. "Start building a packet. Emails, call, logs, notices from the bank. Keep every timestamp. Document who contacted you and when. Questions came easily. What format do they need? PDF or physical copies? Nothing altered. What wording for the revocation letter? I'll write the template. You fill in dates and identifying numbers. What happens after submission? The bank shifts liability. She becomes the sole responsible party. By the end of the consultation, a plan existed, simple, lawful, grounded. The drive home passed without reflection. Evening light met me as I stepped into the garage. Old lumber machine oil, familiar markers of every project I've used to stitch my life together. The workbench held its usual clutter. I spread the documents across it, page by page. 2 decades of receipts. Tuition office letters. Promissory notes from when Lauren had barely turned 18. Envelopes addressed to parent or guardian. My shoulders dropped, not out of regret, but recognition. I had carried all of it willingly. What hurt wasn't the history. It was the way she'd rewritten it. A vibration from the phone cut through my focus. "Heard you're stirring things up. Don't make this hard on us. No name. Didn't need one." The message confirmed everything Elliot had warned me about. Once people fear accountability, they push harder, not clearer. Another alert came an hour later. Unrecognized login attempt blocked. A device I didn't own. A location I'd never visited. I took the screenshot, saved it to my archive, and secured every account. Passwords changed, recovery keys updated. Each small action tightened the boundary she'd tried to step over. Elliot's instructions replayed like a checklist. Collect, verify, record, prepare. At the dining table, I drafted the revocation letter. The tone stayed clean, no blame, no emotion, just accuracy. I withdraw all guarantees associated with, followed by account numbers, dates, legal clauses. I reviewed the text twice, then picked up the pen. My hand hovered for a moment. Not hesitation acknowledgement. 20 years of effort and trust sat beneath this signature. Still the ink flowed. My name landed on the page with the steadiness of someone done pretending the ground hadn't shifted. Not final, not submitted, but real. I placed the letter at the center of the table and set my palms on either side of it. No tremor, no doubt. The bank's letter arrived early, stamped in red, a warning already past courtesy. The notice was direct. If the overdue balance wasn't resolved within 48 hours, my name would move into the highest risk category. Not conditional. Certain. I set the envelope on the counter. A tight pull spread through my chest, the kind the body gives when it's tired of absorbing blows. My hand shook slightly as I reached for a glass of water, steadying it with more focus than a simple task should require. Before the glass touched the sink, my email chimed. Insurance, premium increase, potential delinquency event affecting your risk profile. A financial glitch that wasn't mine had reached far enough to touch my health care. That single fact hit harder than the wording. Another alert lit up. My former employer. A benefits clerk explained that a credit flag had paused my reimbursement request. The phrasing was polite. The implication wasn't the reliability attached to my name had slipped. 3 hits in a row. None catastrophic alone, but together they pressed down with a force I couldn't reason away. Breath shortened, shoulders knotted. A pressure settled behind my sternum, steady and unmistakable. Then the phone rang. Lauren. Her name hadn't appeared on my screen in weeks. A tightening moved through my gut memory and instinct colliding. But I answered. Her voice sliced in before I spoke. Dad, please stop ruining my life. We need this restructuring. I can't pay those installments. You just have to sign. Why are you fighting me? The tone wasn't fear or guilt. It was irritation sharpened to a point. My voice stayed level. Why didn't you tell me you got married? She exhaled dramatically as though my question was trivial. Because you always make everything bigger than it needs to be. You overreact. You judge. I didn't want a scene. A cold clarity washed over me. She wasn't just avoiding responsibility. She saw me as an obstacle, a barrier, not a parent. Her voice kept rising, blaming, pushing, twisting the narrative into something convenient for her. I'm asking you for help. You're making it impossible. Just sign the form. I listened without interrupting, letting her words fall where they landed. The volume, the tone, the entitlement, none of it surprised me anymore. But hearing her describe me as the problem after the weeks I'd spent picking up the pieces of her choices carved a line straight through any hesitation. When she paused long enough for me to respond, only one answer felt right. No. The silence on her end snapped like a rubber band stretched too tight. Then you're choosing to hurt me, she said, almost hissing. The call ended a second later. The room stilled around me, not in shock, but in finality. My laptop sat on the dining table. Opening the folder marked, "Accountability required no effort." Every file lay there, the forged signature scan, the late payment notices, the insurance warning, the login alert, screenshots of messages, copies of loan agreements dating back to her first semester. With one motion, I attached everything to an email addressed to Attorney Brooks. The subject line remained plain. Documentation requested. His reply came sooner than expected. You need to revoke the guarantee today. If you don't, the full liability stays with you. No softening, no space for indecision. The kitchen chair scraped lightly across the floor as I sat down. The revocation letter lay exactly where I'd left it. My hand hovered over the page for a single breath before moving. Each stroke of ink felt deliberate, steady. The signature settled into place. A message from the bank arrived an hour later confirming receipt. They acknowledged the revocation and stated the loan would now be assigned solely to Lauren Hale. A second email followed noting that her credit profile would undergo reassessment. The morning after I signed the revocation, something in me finally settled. Not relief, not peace, just the sense that the weight I'd carried for years had named itself and stepped aside. At 9, the bank opened. I walked in with the envelope, handed it to the clerk, and waited while she called a supervisor. The supervisor read the document twice, matched my ID, and pressed a stamp across the top page. From this point forward, Mr. Hale, all responsibility transfers to the borrower. You're fully released. Her tone carried no pity, no warmth, just finality. That was enough. In the parking lot, my phone lit up with a paragraph from Lauren. Half apology, half accusation. She wrote, "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Then you're being heartless. Then we were trying to protect you." Every line contradicted the last. I didn't reply. Later in the week, I stopped by the clinic for a refill. Marla spotted me near the back garden pruning a shrub. "You holding up?" she asked. A nod. She read more than I said. "Good. Just don't let anyone drag you through their chaos. No lecture, no pressure, just a truth spoken plainly." Over the next days, a cousin sent me screenshots. Relatives were trading stories, unsure who to believe. Someone mentioned Lauren's firm reviewing an irregularity in one of her filings. Corporate code for something didn't add up. I didn't feel vindicated. It was simply the world correcting its tilt. Retirement came easily. HR processed the paperwork. My benefits stayed intact enough to live on. I packed up the condo toolbox clothes books and left the rest to donation bins and neighbors. Bend offered the kind of distance I needed. A rented cabin on a wooded ridge. A place that didn't demand anything from me. Fixing loose boards and crooked shelves felt like reclaiming a part of myself I'd lost while trying to hold a family together, alone. A technician at a hardware store mentioned their non-profit needed someone who understood wiring and pump mechanics. I applied. They hired me the next day. No one asked about my past. No one dissected my finances. Work was work. Replace a filter, adjust pressure valves, teach volunteers which bolts actually mattered. Weeks fell into a steady rhythm. Drive, repair, return. Evenings filled with sawdust and small fixes. The silence wasn't punishment. It was oxygen. Lauren sent one last message. Short. "I hope one day you'll understand." I archived it. Not out of spite, out of self-preservation. Life in Bend didn't feel like a retreat. It felt earned. Tasks that once blended into routine now carried meaning, boiling water, sanding a door frame, tightening a hinge. Not symbols, just actions I controlled. One morning, the nonprofit scheduled a trip up to a remote site. I checked my tools the night before: wrenches, clamps, spare fittings. When the day came, the air was sharp and cold. I picked up a small wrench from the counter, placed it in the toolbox, and shut the lid with a solid click. The truck waited outside. Another system to fix. Another day that belonged entirely to me. My hand paused on the driver's door, not hesitation, not reflection, just a moment to acknowledge everything that had shifted. Then I stepped in, turned the engine, and headed toward the ridge. The road unfolding clean and steady in front of me.